Hello, everyone. Welcome to the tonight's
Hello.
DEY Book Talk, Defending the Early Years. My name is Denisha Jones, and I serve as the executive director. For those of you just joining, we are recording this, so I don't think you'll come up from recording unless you talk, and you can only talk during the Q&A. I'll keep you muted until then. But during the Q&A, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can come off mute because we're a small, intimate group, and we can do it that way. But we do record this and send out the recording to everyone who registered so that they can also participate in today's discussion. Let me pin my guest here too. All right, there we go. So again, this is a book talk for Defending the Earliest. This is our second to last one, actually. So we kicked this off in January. I had a goal of reading more books, and I wanted to encourage you to read some amazing books. So we hosted a monthly book talk. We're doing two in the month of June. We're also aligning this with the Black Lives Matter at School guiding principles. One of them is Black women, and we celebrate that in June around some Say Her Name work. That we do. And so I thought it would be great to have two Black women authors. Well, I know you're definitely a Black woman. The next woman, I think she's Black, but even if she's not, her book is Stories of Resistance about Black women. So
Yeah.
it fits for the theme, right? I was like, let me stop
Yes.
calling Alyssa Black when I don't really know how she identifies, right? I'll find out.
Right.
We'll all find out
hmm
next week.
hmm
So we are delighted to have Kisa Marx, who is a Defending the Early Years National Advisor, an
Yes.
amazing early childhood provider, advocate, and activist. And she has a new book out. Normally, this is when I would show you the cover of the book, but I've been reading my electronic copy, so I can't show you the cover.
I
If
can show
Kisa
you
has
my
her,
copy,
there
but
you go. There's her
it has
copy.
coffee on it.
Oh, it's okay. It's called We Are Who We Are Waiting For. And there's a second little title there. What is it?
Transformative change in early childhood. I don't know why I
Transformative
can't
change in
fit
early
it on the
childhood.
screen.
No, that's totally fine. Yes, so we are who we're waiting for. Transformative change in early childhood came out what just a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, so it came out everywhere on May 19th, but it came out on through Red Leaf on April 15th.
April 15th. Okay, yeah.
March
So
15th,
that's
excuse
March
me.
15th. Yeah. So
hmm
published a couple months ago by Red Leaf, and it's now available to all, which is great.
Yes.
And so that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, I must say, I have a little essay in the book. Keith was
You
asking me to
do.
write something. I know I found it right away. I was like, oh, there it is. I was like, oh, I got to remember what I wrote. That was some juicy stuff. I'm
hmm
like, I need that.
Yeah.
And I wrote a blurb for the book, right? So
Yes.
I'm no stranger to it, and I've been fortunate
hmm
to have been a colleague of Kisa since I think we first met at the Play and Powers retreat a couple,
We
not the
did.
last one, but before that. Yeah, that
Yeah.
that one that
We
I
were
first one that I went to.
roommates.
We were roommates at the retreat. Was
Yes.
that your first retreat? Because you tell the
That
story
was my
about wanting
first retreat
you tell the story
ever.
about wanting to go home, and I'm like, wait, was that
So
when she
bad.
was rooming with me?
So bad. Oh,
And
I'm
you're like, what am I
so
doing
glad
in
I
this
didn't get a
space with
signal.
these people I don't know and all of that, right? But it was so much fun,
It
right?
was
Like
life changing.
it really
Yeah.
is. And I'm not even
Yeah.
in the classroom with children, so I feel like I'm like stealing this opportunity away from an
Yeah.
actual practitioner of early childhood ed. But I love being in that space. I love being in what
Yeah.
Keisha creates. I've met so many great people, right? Like that are just
Mhm.
gonna be, important people in my life for a while. So it's a really,
Mhm.
really awesome experience if you're not familiar with the Play and Powers retreat that is put on
Mhm.
by Keisha Reed. She just wrapped up a Mind, Body, Soul retreat, and hopefully she'll be offering another one in the next summer. And we'll
Yeah.
share
She's
those details
phenomenal.
with you. Yeah, she's phenomenal
Yeah.
too. So,
And I
all
just
right.
want to say you're
Yeah,
not
go
in the
ahead.
classroom with kids, but
Yes.
we're all exactly where we're supposed to be. And you were in that room with me for a reason because you
Yes.
blew me
Yes.
away. And I did not get a signal, so I could not run away. But being in that room with you was life changing. So I'm glad you were there.
Yes, I'm so glad you did not run away because
Yeah.
we could be a little much early childhood educators, looking for
Yeah.
some space and all these play warriors and play advocates, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So our plan for today is I have some questions that I'm going to ask Keitha about the book. It's amazing. If you don't have a copy, you need to get one right away, but you can still follow along if you haven't read. And we're just going to have a discussion. And then again, like I said, there will be time at the end for Q&A. You can put your questions into the chat and I will read them aloud. Or once we're done, I will let you come off mute and you can ask your question directly to Keitha as well too. All right, so let's begin with the first question. If you could please share your impetus for writing this book, what do you hope readers take away from it?
So the impetus was twofold. Initially, many moons ago, I started out as a very classroom centered, teacher centered care provider, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt like there was something off. I always, it's just something whispering inside me, like things have to change, but I didn't have the words for it. I didn't have the tools. And then it changed. When it started to change, I wanted to document everything that I noticed. I talk about carcerality, I talk about oppressive systems, and I started to really notice it in the classroom, like the things that we were doing that were so punitive to children, not just in a classroom, but in early childhood. And so I was started to really want to highlight that to other educators and show them that. But I couldn't get a book published because I wasn't a published writer, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
just started, I kept writing. I have all these notes, I have all these journals. And finally, after I think three rejections, I was like, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? There's another way to do this. And I started an Instagram page. And I was like, I'll just make what I'm saying accessible. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll write because I always write long-winded posts. And so I'll write my writings and I'll show people how you can do it differently. And basically, that was how everything came to be because the more that I talked about it, the more people wanted to be in conversation about it. I started doing workshops, and then somebody was like, "Hey, can you write something about it?" And I was like, "Say less. I've already been doing it." And I just
Mm-hmm.
turned that in. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard because the writing is right. What I love about it is that it's made for teachers, right? It's clearly
Hmm.
not something you're doing to get tenure at a university, which is a lot of the writing that in my world that we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's
Hmm.
accessible, right? It's written in a
Yeah.
way that it's just putting out good knowledge, and I was like, I don't know what the freedom of writing without having to cite everything I'm saying. Like I can't just speak my truth and knowledge without having to like make sure it's backed up by what somebody else said, right? And so I think that kind of writing is really powerful and is really needed
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
one of the things I feel like is so important in this field is that we trust ourselves. Early childhood teachers, y'all out there actually working in the room with the young kids every day, that you
Yeah.
recognize how educated and smart you are about what you do. And I don't think
Hmm.
there's space for that, right? Because
There
if the
isn't.
world is controlled by the folks like me, the academics, right? The letters after their
Hmm.
names, we take up that space as the authority figures. But what I've always taught my teachers, even the beginning ones starting out, you're the most knowledgeable about child development, about what children need, how they grow. That you've been training, you've been studying this. You have more knowledge about this than anyone else in the room, right? Parents are
Yeah.
experts on their own children, absolutely all day. But you're
Hmm.
experts on how to like get a bunch of children to learn and be together and exist in an environment together, right? And support each other. And that knowledge is important. And so I love that you're able to put your voice forward and your authority as I've been
Hmm.
doing the work. You've been doing this work for a while. You run a successful
Yeah.
business. You have been caring for children. What I say, being a brain architect for the early years of life, right? And so
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think it's important. When I read it, I feel like you are standing in this truth and knowledge about what you bring to the table. And I think that's so important. And I hope other people
Thank
recognize
you.
that too. You're
I
welcome.
just want to say something about that because
Hmm.
it's so true. So I've always had this inner conflict because whether do I go back to school, do so I can get some letters behind my name so people can take me serious. And then I was like, no, because I do have that experience. My oldest living child will be 30. I have been dealing with children for a long time.
Hmm.
And so, there's just a certain amount of expertise that I come from, that I come with from parenting, from taking care of children, from working in school systems. I've done it all, right? And there's nothing wrong with speaking in a way that everyone else understands.
Absolutely.
Now, having said that, when I started writing this book, I did lean academic heavy, right?
Hmm.
Because I know how to do that. My
Hmm.
background
Hmm.
is in writing as well as education. So I
Hmm.
know how to lose my entire voice and
Yes,
make
yes.
it very clean because you lose
Hmm.
all your soul when you have to do that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I took a trip to Kelowna, Canada. And when I took that trip, everything changed.
Okay.
And one of the main things that changed is that there was something spiritually that was demanded of me that I needed to put my real voice in there.
Mm.
And so what's in my draft is not what's in that book. These are
Oh,
two
wow.
separate things
Mm.
because it couldn't be clinical, it couldn't be cited. It had to be me. The way that I talk, the way that I write, my experiences, everything had to change in order for it to be very truthful. So it seems like two totally different books.
Wow, that's a great story. I'm so glad you shared it with us. And I will say it's definitely a book for learning. Like I wrote in my blurb, like this is a book I could
Mhm.
share with students, and I could because
Yeah.
you have all these terms that you define and that are
Hmm.
really important to the work, and you have these great reflective questions, right? So there is a piece in there where I can see the academic part in it, right? This is a
Yeah.
tool, a resource for
Hmm.
people to use, but it's not done in the way that might make some people feel like I can't access this,
I
right?
can't.
I can't
Yes.
understand
It's
this,
so
right?
accessible. That was
Citations throw
intentional.
people off,
Hmm.
right? Like,
They
and I
do.
know that, and like they make me go down a rabbit hole because I see the citation and then I want to go to the reference list and then I forgot what I'm reading, right? So like, I think it's important to
Yeah.
have a book like this where
Hmm.
you're sharing personal stories, you're sharing lessons that you've learned, information, but you're also giving them the knowledge that they need, right? To kind of
Yeah.
embrace it, not just like what you might get on a Facebook post, right? But more than
Right.
that, right? It's the deeper part,
Yeah.
which I love.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the book has 15 chapters that cover so many topics. Is there a
Hmm.
common thread that you use to kind of combine all of these smaller stories into this one cohesive book?
Yes. It would be liberation.
Okay.
The entire story, I'm a connect the dots type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire story through each chapter, they can stand alone if
Yes,
you
yes.
just read piece by piece, but
Mm-hmm.
every single one is some sort of either liberation of self or me encouraging people to liberate someone else. And that is the single thread that is wound throughout the book.
I love that because you and I speak the liberation language together, and it's
Yes,
so
yes,
for your podcast, Liberated Learning. I'm like, oh God,
yes.
please don't trademark that name, so I can't use it ever because I'm all about liberated learning, and
And I
so
wouldn't
yeah.
because I want us to all do it.
Yeah, good, good. I mean, I understand if you want to like come up with a cute logo that nobody can steal,
Yeah.
right? I get that. But it's so important to have this language because I think people don't really associate liberation with early childhood, right? When I talk
Yeah.
about in my work, I say, I always heard about liberation, about education as the practice of freedom, thinking about like social foundations of ed, but it was really applied to like high school students. Like Paulo Freire worked with
Mhm.
young adults, right? People outside of
Mhm.
education field. Bell Hooks was a college professor. Like all of these theories really came from people who worked with older kids, either secondary high school
Yeah.
level or college or you just adults. And so they talk
Mhm.
about these things that you have to develop, right? This the consciousness, right? The critical consciousness that you have to develop in kids. But they're not talking about 3 and 4 year olds with critical consciousness,
No.
and they're not talking
No.
about
Mhm.
liberation of 5 year olds and letting them move about in a space freely and make decisions for themselves freely, right? No one's really thinking about that. And
Mhm.
I think that's intentional. I think there's like, we don't realize that many of us buy into the opposite of liberation, which is freedom suppression of young children. And we think that's
Yeah.
normal. We think that's required to teach them, that we have to have them
Mhm.
sitting still like complete robots mimicking our every move or we're not
Mhm.
in control. But yet we want
Mhm.
high school students who can critically analyze the world and can make their own decisions. They can't do any of that if we started suppressing their freedom and 5 year olds, and then all of a sudden we expect them to have these skills in high school, right? So I think the
And they have
liberation
to
in
go
early
about
childhood.
it. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No,
I'm
no, go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead.
Mhm. No, I was just agreeing with you and
Hmm.
thinking that there's so many people, especially people of the global majority, that have to go back and fight to reclaim their freedom, right? Reclaim their time, reclaim their joy, all these things they have to do when we fail to realize that we never had it to begin with. There's a huge difference between freedom and liberation,
Hmm.
and freedom has conditions. It can be rash give and taken at any moment. And
Okay.
I consider freedom to be time and choice. And
Hmm.
children do not have that.
Nope.
Many adults do not have time and
Yes.
choice.
Yes.
And so, if we're talking about liberation, nobody can take that from you. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to, just like joy, it has to be built. And it's like a slow building thing that
Mm-hmm.
comes throughout your life. And it starts in early childhood. You can't just come up to somebody and hand them liberation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think we have to really rethink and think critically about how we're dealing with young children, because if we want them to truly be free, then we should all be focused on their liberation.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my work, I talk about how play, like play as pedagogy, play as, the way we engage with young children, it liberates both the child and the teacher.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
want us to buy into this world where everything we do is for the children, even if we're suffering while doing it. Like, come on now, that's where we've been.
yeah.
That's where we
Yeah.
are, right?
Yeah.
Working, killing ourselves to
Mm-hmm.
make these perfect classroom environments for young children and not getting the
Hmm.
respect we want in our profession for that.
And
But
it's
I'm
not
like,
even working.
no, but I'm like, but wait, if you liberate children, you're gonna liberate yourself too. And that's super important. I want you to do this because I want us all to be free. And you're not free. Or teachers are not free. We're not free. Most educators are not free to do what they know children deserve, do what they know children need, give them what they need, do what they know is right. And so
And
if
what
you're
the
not
teacher
free,
needs, what the
yeah, and what the
educator
educator
needs.
needs, right? Yeah.
This
And so,
system is
mhm,
so heavy on everyone. It's hard on the administrators, it's hard on the
yes,
educators, it's hard on the families, it's hard,
yes,
especially hard on the children that sit in the classroom. It's hard on everyone. And just think about the negative connotation that comes with play. And oh, they're just playing, it's going to be chaos. It's the Lord of the Flies. It's this, is that, it's this, is that. A truly play focused environment is hard work.
yes, yes.
You have to know what you're doing. But
Hmm.
once you do it, everybody's better. You're
Hmm.
better, you're peaceful. You could work a 8, 10 hour day. You walk out, your shoulders are lighter because it's not oppressive. You're not being bogged down, and neither are the children.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I saw that, I experienced that. We were talking about Keisha before I visited one of her preschools. I spent a few days observing there. And what I always remember is that normally when I go into schools as a teacher educator, as a professor, observing my students, like it's uncomfortable, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
get about 10 minutes into whatever they're trying to do, and then it all starts to fall apart, right? The structure
Right.
falls apart. The kids start getting antsy because, sitting crisscross applesauce is really not comfortable
No,
for
no.
anybody, right? And
Mm-mm.
so normally I'm looking at my watch, I'm observing, but I'm like, when is this over? Can I go? Because I love being in the
Mm-hmm.
schools, but I don't like being in spaces where children are trying to be managed and controlled, and it's
Mm-hmm.
tough, right? But then I'm at this preschool, and like it was 1 o'clock before I even checked the time. I didn't even think about lunch. I was so relaxed because they created this environment where they eliminated most of the transitions, most of the things that make it stressful. And I was there focusing on the teachers, and I saw how you can be in an environment where you're not very
Mm-hmm.
stressed, you're not stressed out with everything that you're doing with the children.
Yeah.
And that was beautiful. Like they were really engaged. And I'm talking to one teacher, and excuse me, I need to go document what she's about to do right now because she's been trying to do this all week. I'll be right back. Like she's talking
Yeah.
to me and sees this girl about to hit a milestone, and she's like, I gotta go. And she'll run over there and document that and then come right back. Didn't interrupt the girl, didn't do anything, just documented it for later. Like I saw you
See?
did it right, and then come back over and finish the conversation. That kind of awareness of what's happening, being with me and being in the moment, right? It comes from being in this space where you are kind of free to follow the children's instincts, to really observe them deeply and see what they're doing. And so I wish there
Yeah,
were more spaces like that for early childhood teachers, because what I
I do too.
usually see is people just, it's a lot. They're stressed out, they're tired,
Mhm.
they're overworked, they're underappreciated, right? They're all these things. And so these environments that where we can all be free and liberated, I think are super important for sure.
And we've been conditioned to believe that there's a way, a formula that and a product that we have to serve up. And
Mm-hmm.
once we realize that this is not the case, what we've been taught to do is actually causing harm. Once
Mm.
there's a bigger conversation being had about that, and more people start to normalize what is real and true. This is factual, is research based. We can go back and prove that this works. Then
Hmm.
I think things will really, really change for our children, for our educators, and for our the culture of our communities,
Yeah.
because that everything is suffering because we're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Yeah, and that has to we have to recognize that it's not working, right? Like it's
It's
not
not working.
one of my online courses I talk about I call how we got here and how we get free. Like we first have to
Ooh.
understand how we get into this situation where things are this bad, right? And I look at all
Mm-hmm.
these things, nothing that we're doing, all of outside of our control,
Yeah.
recognizing all that, and then okay, now how we get out of this? How do we get free? Because that needs to be it. I don't want to see so many more teachers retiring and leaving because they're just giving up and not
Yeah.
encouraging other people to go into the field because they don't, see it as a viable option, right? That's not working,
Mm-hmm.
like you said. It's not working.
Yeah.
So,
And thinking this is because of COVID. It's not.
oh
COVID
God,
just showed us
yeah,
what was wrong.
yes,
It was
yeah,
already faltering
yes, yeah.
before we got here, you know?
And I think COVID showed us why we need to change because there will be
Yeah.
another COVID. We don't know what's going to be the next disruption of schooling, but we got to know
Hmm.
it's going to be disrupted somehow, some way. And
Yeah.
I don't think we've learned enough to be prepared next time. We wanted to go back to
Mm.
normal. Normal wasn't good, it wasn't working.
No,
And so
normal wasn't
returning
working.
back
We could
there
just start
doesn't,
all
we need
over
a
and do
whole
something
new,
else.
yeah, we need a whole
Yeah.
new approach.
Hmm.
It's interesting. I hear a lot about children are they're different. No, children develop the same way they have been for thousands of
Hmm.
years, right? The
Hmm.
environment is changing, the world is changing, social media, technology, and all, but we're not changing education. We're just
No.
keep doing things the same. And I'm like, who's in the wrong here? We're good,
And everything else around us changes. Education
everything,
stays the
education stays the
same.
same. And there are things we need to change about our approach because it's not serving the current system, right? Children in the
Mm-mm.
current society.
Because it
And then,
wasn't created for the current system.
no, no, not at all. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. So several times you talk about the first 1800 days of a child life. I just feel like this is so kismet because I recently used this understanding. I learned this understanding that there are roughly 1800 days from birth to age 5. And I was
Yeah.
talking about this in my series on advocating for early childhood values of resistance. So I love that. I'm like,
Hmm.
wait, she's talking about the same thing. You're like the
Uh,
first
Me
1800
and you.
days. Always. And I just looked it up. How many days? It's like 1820 some
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
from birth to
Hmm.
age 5, which I think that's
Yeah.
super important, right?
Hmm.
So you also made an important observation about how we treat children during the first 1800 days and systems of oppression. And so can you
Hmm.
share more about why we have to shift from a modern day oppressive approach, like we were just talking about, to a liberation now kind of framework?
Sure. So, one, going to the 1800 days, the reason that I like to point out that they're 1800 days, because if you can track anybody's days, they ain't been here for long, right? There's like, they have not been here long enough for you to put the weight of the world on their shoulders, which we do all the time for children in their
Mm,
early years. So I like to point that out. Also, the systems, like when we talk about like push down academics, we fail to talk about the building of self with the child and their identity, and
mm-hmm,
how we push down all of these. You should know better. How? With no frame of reference would a
mm-hmm,
child know better? We put all of these things on our children. We give them these unrealistic expectations. Everything is by milestone. When should they be using the pot? When can they go to the next room? When should they sit down? When should they be quiet? When should Everything is a checklist for the child. So it becomes really oppressive because they're trying to keep up with those expectations, those transitions, those things
mm-hmm.
that we need them to do. And so in order for our children to truly be liberated, we have to do away with all of that and just let them be.
Yeah.
Humanity itself is simply about being. And so in order for a child to really, I'm trying to think of the simplest way because I like to make
Mm-hmm.
things very, very abstract. So I don't want to confuse anyone. You are your greatest self when you can show up authentically, right? When you don't have to mask, when you don't feel like someone wants you to do something that you don't know whether you're capable of doing.
Mhm.
Thinking going back to imposter syndrome, where you're not sure, like, am I qualified? Can I do this? When you don't have to do any of those things, you shine brightest, right?
Mhm.
In a classroom with children in their first 1800 days. If we didn't, how about if we didn't put those things on children? If we didn't put those parameters on them and we just opened the door and welcomed them as they were, and we could document their learning and we can see what they needed because they were able to tell us through their
Mhm.
behavior. I feel like that is much more, far more liberating than trying to create a system for children that you don't know, create one blanket system and then copy and paste for 12 to 24 students. That's a system that children can't keep up with. That's a
Mhm.
system that children are going to fail in and get marginalized in. They're going to be out of the center because they're trying to keep up and be somebody else. You can't do in 2026 with these children what you did in 2006 with another classroom.
Mhm.
The culture is different, the environment's different, the needs are different, the mental strain is different, and so you can't do that.
Mhm.
You have to make things contextual and deal with the children that are in the room. So my suggestion is that if we're going to be truly liberatory, then we have to remove all of that stuff that's
Yeah.
weighing the classroom environment down.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always said I think one of the first things I would do if I was ever put in charge of fixing public education, I would like get rid of like 90% of the curriculum gone. Like we just have too
Absolutely.
much. Like there's just too much. There's
It's
too many
too
standards. There's too
much.
much knowledge that we
Yes.
are trying to force into the minds of children for 12 years, 13 years. It's just too
Hmm.
much. And I don't think no. And then because I saw this clearly with COVID, right? So I'm
Hmm.
interviewing teachers about COVID. So we asked how the school year ended in 2020. Oh,
Hmm.
they were mostly 90% of the teachers in our study said we were told not to introduce anything new. Makes sense, right? Just catch up,
Hmm.
right? Okay. So then we're preparing for opening for the next school year. And only one teacher that we interviewed out of like 20 teachers said they were high school. They got together and they revamped the next year's curriculum to make up for the gaps that they didn't cover in the end of this year. That's a high school teacher. Did anyone do this
Yeah.
in elementary? No. And then
Yeah.
what are we talking about? Learning loss. So you
Hmm.
didn't teach new content and then you started a new school year and didn't look at that. Like we didn't change anything. We expected
Yeah.
everything to happen the same way in the middle of a deadly global pandemic that was upending our lives. We didn't say, okay, back up. Do we need all this knowledge? Like, what happens if they don't, like, how can we change things and streamline it? And that is so frustrating because that was an opportunity, I think, to like step back and say, we need to less discrete things and more like overarching things that we can cover easily, right? Instead of
Hmm.
it has to be this, and that. So yeah, I think that's part of the oppression that we put students through is that
Yeah.
we put too much, like you said, too much of a requirement. I love the quote you said during a child's first 18 years on earth, we regulate their time, ration their autonomy, dole out instruction, create hierarchies that impose balances of power, and use that power to control how children under us learn, move, and behave. And it made
Yes.
me think of, I recently did a DEY dialogue with a professor who wrote an article about microfascism in early childhood, which nobody really
Hmm.
wants to think about, right? But
Hmm.
like fascist societies really started in education. They talked about
Yeah.
having a brutal, tough education to prepare them for the world they were building. And I'm like, how many times are we doing that now without even thinking about it? And I hear that all the time. We got to
Everywhere
prepare the
in
kids
our
for the world
culture.
we're in.
Yep.
Yeah. No. We can't
Hmm.
prepare them for this horrible world that we're in.
Yeah,
Why? We need to
no.
prepare them
Hmm.
for the world we want them to develop and create, right?
Hmm.
And so I don't think
And if you
people
want to
realize.
do that,
Hmm.
if you want to prepare them for a cruel world, you might want to be softer.
Right?
They,
Right?
you might want, because a lot of people think that resilience is built from, getting knocked down and getting up. It's like that is a trauma response. Like
Yes, yes.
resilience comes from belonging. Resilience
Hmm.
comes from love and trust and relationship. That's what makes you truly able to get through pandemic and keep your wits about you, like things were going really bad and you can survive. To get through these hard things is that you feel like you deserve to go through whatever adversity there is and
Hmm.
to move forward. And so I think we're just going about it the wrong way.
Yeah.
I know culturally how we were raised. We were raised to, just keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting. But again, that is a trauma response. You
Hmm.
don't want anybody to knock you down. Not like this is all love and we're good. We deserve to be here. I deserve to be heard. I have a voice that matters. Those things come from somebody, pouring into you, pouring that love into you. And I don't mean pouring education into you,
Mm,
but
yes,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an important distinction for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's where I put the link in the chat. Someone asked about it. So I put
Mhm.
that in the chat for about so you'll find the recording on the microfashion discussion, but also her article is linked to the website. And
Mhm.
so that's there to take a look at. But I think it's really helpful
Okay.
because not really people are talking about this, right? This ways
Mhm.
that but I think they're all connected. Like we're starting very young to prepare children to have less autonomy, less critical thinking, and that's what some parts of the world want, right? They want people
Mhm.
who are docile and just do what they're told and don't question that. And they've wanted that since they've seen, right, what happened when kids
Mhm.
protesting war and doing all this stuff, right? It scares a lot of the
Yeah.
people in
Mhm.
power. And so they want that. And I think people miss sometimes about it starts really young and that a lot of
Mhm.
us think it's okay to be like that with young children because we think that's how they grow and that's going to help them learn. But like you said, it doesn't, resilience is not something that comes from adversity. I mean, it has to, but you want to get resilience from other places before you need your resilience for adversity, right? But
Exactly.
or
Exactly.
yeah. I was just talking to my niece who had a 4-year-old, a daughter, and we were talking about, and they're like, someone was accusing her of gentle parenting, and I said, no, you're just really conscious that you don't. She might say something very rude to you, but it's not intended that way. She doesn't look
Mhm.
at mommy and go, Mama, I'm gonna say something really rude to you right now. She's just
Yeah.
mimicking what she hears in the environment. So like she cut her eyes at me, and I just laugh because she rolled her eyes at me hard but I know she's seen people doing that and she's trying to
Mhm.
mimic whether to do that now in this time and space is that the right thing. But I also know that had I been my mom, she would have caught hell for that, right? Because that's
Listen.
not
Yes.
acceptable to do that. But she's 4, and I just laughed
Mhm.
because she really
Mhm.
did it, but it seems that way. It's like, how do you balance that, right? Between giving
Mhm.
kids space to play with what they're learning with and not, see it intentional, but also to build them to the point where they can have these important conversations and not just constantly shutting them down. Don't do that, right? And
Mhm.
how discipline is not really effective. I said, if you want a child to learn something, right, you have to give them opportunity for self-regulation. Discipline isn't
That's
going to
right.
teach her anything except don't get caught. That's what I learned
Mhm.
when I got punished, right?
Mhm.
Don't get caught. Not don't do what I'm doing, just be
Mhm.
smarter about it, right? Because I didn't want my mom
Yeah.
to find out. And I think a lot of people miss that like discipline and punishment don't build the skills that we want, right? But autonomy
Experience
and agency,
does.
experience
Yes.
does, all those things
Yes.
help children, right? But we're so taught that no, we got to shut down those behaviors and we've got to jump in,
Yeah.
right? And we need to
Mhm.
focus on that.
But no, you have to give them room to grow and you have to,
Yeah.
and they'll just like any other type of play, there's trial and error, there's failure. That did not work.
No, right? Exactly. They got to learn that. So many people want
Yeah.
to prevent failure. I'm like, failure is where you realize that, okay, you got to try. I've seen kids
Yeah.
in the middle of failure just come up with some brilliant ideas, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's so great because they wouldn't have gotten that if I would have told them that what they're doing wasn't going to work. I could have told you that, but
Yeah.
they would have learned
Yeah.
anything. They had to fail at
They
that.
won't
And it's
learn it
like,
that way. Yeah.
no. And
I
even a
mean,
little
you,
frustration. We don't want it to be too frustrating because we know it's got to be within their zone of proximal development, but it's
mhm.
got to be a little bit of frustration. Even a little
Yeah, a
frustration is
little bit of
good. Yeah,
struggle.
let them
And
learn how to
us.
regulate that frustration. A
Yeah.
lot of times we want kids not to be frustrated. They don't know how to
Mhm.
regulate frustration when it occurs. Maybe
Mhm.
we haven't learned how to regulate frustration because we were not allowed to be frustrated, right? We were not
We
allowed. When we were kids, we're not allowed to have any problems. What do you mean you got a problem? You a kid, you ain't
no
got no
feelings,
problems.
no
And I'm
problems,
like,
no.
oh my God, child, you're allowed to have a bad day. You're allowed to have worries. You're allowed,
Yes.
but a lot of parents think that that's if you're having problem, then it's reflected on them and their parenting and not just what it's like to be a child, right? A powerless child in a world where everyone
Yes.
else controls all of your all of your important life decisions,
Yes,
right?
yes. And I think that that sums it up. I think that we never learned, and I say we as like society,
Hmm.
we never learned that it was okay to possess those feelings, to navigate life as a powerless being, right? And
Yeah.
everybody's telling you what to think, say, do, where to go, what to eat, how much to eat, when to laugh, how loud to laugh, how much joy you can have, all these things that are outside of your control that have to do with your being. And so when we get older, our knee-jerk response is a worldview. We were
Mm.
taught to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now we have to do the work of unlearning all that. And that when educators say, "Oh, we have another thing to do." If you don't do anything else, do that.
Yeah.
Unlearn every single thing you learned from growing up, right? Heal that. Because
Hmm.
once you liberate that, your little self and all those messed up worldviews that you got and that are playing in the soundtrack in your head, once you record something different, everybody's going to be better for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So we were talking about this a little bit, but the question is, your book puts forth a vision of liberation for all children, but especially Black children. And I want to come back to that after this question, like the focus on Black children and why that's important. And I know it throws some people off, but we'll get back to that. But
Okay.
as I just mentioned, right, many early educators believe it's our job to prepare children for the world we have, which is not liberating. So how would you
Mhm.
respond to those who think liberation is irresponsible, given the current reality that we find ourselves in?
I think the issue is that humanity is missing from a lot of it. And
Mm.
so if we focus on humanity, then liberation is the only way.
Mhm.
If we want to get people ready for an assembly line, if we want to get people ready to not think and to be docile, then yeah, let's keep doing things the way that we're doing. We're on track
Mhm.
to get to those points. But if you want to focus on healing,
Mhm.
on the disproportionate numbers of people who are just unwell to varying degrees. And it's because the lack of humanity everywhere you go in all systems. I'm not, this is private school, public school, it would, no matter where your zip code is, someone is being marginalized in that space.
Mm.
Someone is being their identity, their culture, um their self is being erased in a space, right?
Mhm.
And so liberation is saying I deserve to be in this space. I answer to the name. I create the name I answer to. I'm worthy of being here. And so are you. There's no just me, myself, and I. It's for
Mhm.
all, right?
Yeah.
We ain't free till everybody's free.
Mhm.
And so if you're community centered, you want liberation. If you're culturally centered, you want liberation. If you want to fight for the queer population, you're liberation centered. If you're fighting for differently able people, you're liberation centered because we want everybody to be free.
Mhm.
There's only one way to get out, and that's through liberation.
Yeah.
So I would just focus on, do you think your life matters? Then you should be focused on liberation
Yeah.
because everyone, all of us deserves to be here. All of us are worthy of being here. And if we want things to get better, because right now it is certainly not,
No.
then we better be focused on liberation of
Yeah.
everybody in the room.
Yeah. And I think we forget that children are really good at like the dualities of things, right?
They
Because they
are.
understand, right? They understand things that be pretend and not real and then right? So they can
Hmm.
understand that, yeah, the world is not like this, but this is what we want. Like they're not incapable of holding those two. We are incapable sometimes of holding two opposing
We
things
are
together in
because
a
we've been
safe
taught
space
that.
because we've been
Yeah.
taught, but young
But
children
they're
are not.
justice censored. These are
No,
justice
yeah,
oriented people.
yes.
And
Yeah.
so right, wrong, fair, unfair, they're with it
I
as
always
soon
love
as
that
they
you
come in the
can't you
room.
can't really explain homelessness to a child because it doesn't make sense
Mhm.
because it's not supposed to.
No,
Because they'll
no.
say things like, "Well, why don't we just give them the empty homes that nobody lives in?" And
Yeah.
and you how do you explain that to them?
And you're like,
And it's
yeah.
no, you're right because it's they can't defend you can't defend an unjust system and because
Yeah.
there's no defense of it. And even though we
Yeah.
come to accept and understand that it's okay for people to hoard more property than they need while other people are sleeping on the street, a 5-year-old
Hmm.
can't make sense of that and they shouldn't, right?
No.
We have to train them to accept that as the response,
Hmm.
but it's not their normal behavior because
Yeah.
they're all about fairness and justice and it just doesn't make sense, right? And I think
And we
that's
can
super
learn so
important.
much from them. We
Yes,
can learn.
yes.
I have a chapter in the book, The Children of the Revolution,
Mm,
and that's what I talk about. It's like if we're looking for the way, we have to look to them.
yeah.
The children have it figured out. It's us.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, yeah,
know, we have the work to do, but
yeah,
they're good.
yeah. And if we actually listen to them and like listen to their ideas and really thought,
Yeah,
really incorporated them, we could see a big difference. Kids can solve big problems, right?
they
Because they don't
can.
have the same limitations that we do on being imaginative and thinking outside the box. They have no boxes
Yeah.
until we give them
They
to
they
them.
have no box. They will bust through that box. They will.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They
They
don't have
do
the
not
scarcity
care.
mindset. I think that's a huge
No.
one that keeps us stuck in this space. Scarcity, that
Yeah.
there's not enough love and goodness to go around in the world, and you
There's
have
not
to be
enough of
scared.
anything. There's not enough
Yeah,
smart people. There's not enough
yeah.
quality. There's not enough. There's not enough. Everything is scarce. And the oh, I lost my train of thought. It was another
No, it's
thing that
okay.
that children just innately have this uh ability to figure out another way.
Mm-hmm.
They can pivot or they're very adaptable. And they're like, well, if this isn't working, just like going back to the homeless population,
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have a home, why don't we put them in these empty houses? Why don't we do this?
Mm-hmm.
They can do that naturally where our brains are kind of fixed and rigid. We don't want
Mm-hmm.
to flex in that
Mm-hmm.
way. And so uh think about when children saying when excuse me, adults are saying, okay, children have this issue with executive functioning. They aren't doing these things. They're falling all over the place. They're causing these problems
Mm-hmm.
and not connecting that it has to do with the lack of play.
Mm-hmm.
Children aren't climbing trees. They're not running. They're
Nope.
not,
They're not
playing in the
developing
dirt.
so many skills.
They're
Their
not
bodies, yeah.
developing the skills that they need. But if you let children be children, they can get what they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just let them show the way, lead the way, you
Yeah.
know?
And they need time and space, right? I think a lot of people will say, "Oh, they don't know what they're doing. They're just sitting there, they're not used to it. Give them some time." We didn't
Give
need
them,
that. We grew
yeah.
up where we knew to go out, get outside, get lost, do stuff, have fun. But like boredom, kids need to be bored. They need time. They need space. They need permission. They'll get back to
Hmm.
their natural. Play is a biological necessity. It is something that all mammals do. Children are no different, but we
They are
don't
not.
let them. So they're not learning.
Hmm.
They're not getting to play the way we did. They're not exploring neighborhoods and going outside, building forts in the woods or,
Yeah.
like exploring,
Yeah.
exploring forests and paths. I mean, if they're fortunate, they're doing that in their early childhood program that's nature-based and
Hmm.
play-based. But if they're not,
Yeah.
when are they getting that opportunity to just be kids, go dig in the dirt? My great niece said she wanted to dance in a puddle. I'm like, yes, get them rain galoshes out there. Let her dance. I said, let her dance in the puddle with no shoes and socks on. Let her feel that rainwater between her toes. Like that is development
We
of her
did
brain.
that today. It's not
Yeah.
even raining. We made it. We made our
Yes.
puddles. They went and got their little galoshes, and some of them just didn't have any shoes on at all. And they
Mm-hmm.
made their little puddles to jump and dance in. And they were
Dancing.
filthy
Yeah.
and they were happy.
Loving it. And
So
it's that
yeah.
sensation they're gonna like it's even if the memory doesn't last, right? Their body
Hmm.
learned from all of that. It impacted
Hmm.
all of their neurons. I mean, we know the brain science about experience and engagement for children, right? I think we get
Yeah.
stuck on like they don't remember none of that, so we think it's not important, only what you can remember. But we don't know
Hmm.
how that's imprinting memories in the body. Right?
Yeah.
It's giving them what they need. It's building those skills,
Hmm.
those I Kim Adams was sharing that with me in our discussion last week. I think she kept saying that perioceptor, is that the right word? I think I'm gonna say it wrong.
Proprioceptive.
Proprioceptive
Yeah.
skills, right?
Hmm.
Body
Yeah.
functions that you need, right?
Hmm.
The stabilizing, the big body play, the rough and tumble,
All the
all that
things that people
stuff.
tell you
Yeah.
not to do. Stop
Yeah,
spinning.
oh my
Stop doing this.
God.
Stop
I
doing that.
can't wait till I get a little touch. Say, come here. And I like to dangle them by their arms and legs. And my mom's like,
Yes.
why do you do that? Because kids need that motion. They
They
need to
need it. They
swing
need it.
back and forth
Yes.
like this. They need to feel fly through the air. I mean, I check
Yeah.
with them because if you're not comfortable, and a lot of them are
Yeah.
scared, but people aren't playing with kids like that anymore. It's one of my
Hmm.
favorite things to do is like, oh, come
Yeah.
here, like throw them on the couch. Like you got to feel your body like fly through there. And then they come
Flying.
running back for more. And like that one arm and one leg dangling. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no one plays with you like this? And they're like, no, no, this is so cool. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what my go-to. Like, and so yeah, you see kids needing so much sensory, right? They're needing to and that's just their body always gonna need and want this stuff, but not getting it.
Yeah. And if we know anything about trauma, we know that the body doesn't forget.
No,
Even when the brain thinks it forgets, or we think we forgot, the body
no,
doesn't forget.
yeah, no, the body keeps score, it remembers
Yeah.
things, right? And all of that
Yeah.
is in there as well
Hmm.
too.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back to this topic about Black children. You open the book in the first chapter by saying, I once heard it said, Black children are the most studied in history, yet the least taught. Before you read another line, let me set the record straight. This book is not another study, it's not another examination. There are hundreds, thousands of works dissecting the Black child, their lives distilled into articles, data points, and scholarly literature. The purpose of this book is different. Its aim is to preserve the dream. And I love that. It's just like a great
Yes.
start. I mean, you started in the prologue about the Watu. I think I said that right, Watu, about the
Watoto.
Watato. I always heard it from the Maasai. How are the
Hmm.
children? And then the children are
Yeah.
well. And so the Watato is another one, right, where they have this
Hmm.
greeting where you pretty much engage people by asking, how are the children? And if the children are
Hmm.
well, then the society is well. So you
Hmm.
start with that, and then you start talking about the dream, but you really center Black children throughout this book. So can you tell us a little bit more about your decision to do that?
Sure. So, I love a good book and I love a good uh educational read, right? And you read all these books about children, Black children, and how they are harmed. And all of the books are talking about what is done to the child, how they are disenfranchised, how they live in these areas that are dangerous, how they are mistreated or marginalized in school, the preschool to prison pipeline, but you never hear about or how you can save them, but you
Mm,
never hear about the child.
mm,
You never hear the child's story. You never hear where the child came from. You never hear any of that. And so going back to the what I was telling you at the beginning about how there are two different books, my draft and what
hmm
came to be, that's how it was. It was all of the information in a very clinical, data-driven way. And then there is the story, and that was more of the archive that, like, if I'm thinking about what we need to do, we don't need to teach another child, we don't need to save a child, we need to preserve the dreams of children, because the research doesn't care about the dreams of children. The research is telling us, is giving us a snapshot of what is happening, right? And we need that information,
hmm
but the humanity is missing in it. So if we got to go
Yep.
get the humanity from the stories. And so we need both. And so my thing is to remind people that behind that data is a story. You can talk about children in the gap that are living in the gap, but many of those children come from homes that are joyful. Many of those children in single parent homes have a mother that will walk through fire for them. right? Or a father who will walk through fire for them. You have these homes that their grandparents took them to beautiful spaces and they got culture and everything else. But if you're just reading the data and the research seems like, oh, these downtrodden, poor on their luck children. But no, all they're missing is resources and opportunity,
Yeah. Yeah.
not humanity.
Mm,
Like, and so it was very important when I first started speaking,
hmm
I was very hesitant to tell my story because I didn't want it to be like trauma porn. I didn't want people like, oh, where she grew up on the south side of Chicago. Oh my God, there were gangs, there was violence. I didn't want that. And I talked about being, in an environmental apartheid and things like that, but it always felt wrong because although it was true, I grew up so happy and I
hmm
grew up so fiercely loved and protected. And so I'm like, okay, you just need to come at this a different way. You have to talk about not just where you came from, but the people who preserved your dreams to create where you are right now. Because I couldn't
hmm
have gotten to where I am right now if there weren't people who believed in me so that I could be in that same violent neighborhood. I can be with the lack of resources. I could have harm around me and still be where I am right now.
Yeah.
I'm not some, oh, she's some shining example. I was just
Yeah.
loved and cared for. That was it.
hmm
People preserved my dream. And so I think it's important that all educators remember that they have one job, and that's to preserve the dream of our children.
I love that so much. And you did a great I read the chapter about your twin sister and it was so powerful because I feel the same way like when I stopped putting myself as like the exception, right? Like and I hate that
Right.
being rooted in
Because
that.
they tell you you're the
They tell you that
exception.
you're the
Hmm.
exception, right? And I'm
Hmm.
like, no, right? There were systems, people who loved me and provided for me and cared for me. But I also
Hmm.
see, like you had a twin sister, so you saw it completely with her, but just my other siblings, right? That I grew up in a house with five of us, the group in a
Hmm.
house, and how we were
Yeah.
all treated differently in school. Now, obviously, I have dispositions that teachers favor.
Hmm.
I liked being in school. I loved the whole feeling of it. I like, I listen. I just see dispositions for learning that made people feel comfortable, where other kids
Yeah.
don't always have that. Like kind of like the know-it-all, the nerd,
Hmm.
the always raising your
Hmm.
hand and wanting to answer the question, like that kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
was treated very differently in school because of those factors, right? And
Hmm.
I noticed my younger siblings in my older, they didn't have that, right? They didn't have that connection to school that made them so they weren't seen as worthy of the same type of educational experiences that I got. And
Hmm.
that's something that I think you point out really well in that chapter about how differently your sister was treated, and I mean
Yeah.
twins, right? And how
Hmm.
just because, right, and the comparisons being made, in front of her to you and her about how different you guys are, and but you in a good way and her in a bad way, and like people don't really think about that impact on children. I had another friend who had two daughters, and one was they're Dominican, but one was light skinned and the other one was dark skinned. And she saw the way that her two daughters were treated differently their whole lives, and it bothered her
Just
to
based off
no
of that.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
It
that's important.
it's so amazing how we can do that. It's easy to say, okay, you have siblings and they're different, but I think it was really important. I struggled. That was the hardest chapter that I wrote, was the chapter about my twin.
Mm,
Um, because I struggled with telling her story and wanted to honor her, but tell her story from my point of view. And there was so much, we were so close.
hmm
And everybody was just like better, worse, smart, dumb, like everywhere. And they did. They just, it's like they didn't stop until they drove a wedge in between. And we can't control our dispositions, right? But the way my brain is wired is the way it's wired. What I'm interested in is what I'm interested in. How reserved I am, that has nothing to do, that's not something I'm doing on purpose. And so to judge someone and treat someone better or worse based on something they cannot control is
Yeah.
really really harmful. It's something that we should think long and hard about when before we open our mouth when we're dealing with
Yeah.
people who are related or just people in the classroom. You
Hmm.
know, why is Brian acting like this and James is acting like that? Because they're two totally different people.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And
So,
they're receiving input from the environments differently, right? So
yeah, yeah.
they're getting all of that.
Hmm.
Um, it made me think of sorry, I just lost my train of thought on that
Hmm.
too, because you were saying
Yeah.
something and I was thinking about oh, the treating children differently. I think the research is clear about this. I used to show my students this video in my class about I forgot what they call the technical word for it. But anyway, they did a study where they told teachers, they like took some students, they told teachers like these kids are on track to do really well and they're really smart and these kids are not. And then they watched for a
Mm.
year and how they made those kids be smart because they treated them differently than the other kids, right? Children rise to meet your expectations and they also fail to meet your low expectation, right? Like if you said that,
Listen,
right? If you
yes,
don't believe in these
yes,
kids, right? Like you think a kid is smart and treat them like they're smart, they're gonna act smart. You think a kid is dumb and you treat them like they're dumb, they're gonna act dumb. So like you have so
yeah.
much power here to really shape that. And the one, the really great teachers treat all children. They hold all children to high expectations. They
Because you're dreaming
understand.
for all of those
Yes,
children.
yes,
You know that there's somewhere they need to go and that you
yeah.
want it to be high. I do talk about that in the book too. I talk about the schools that we went to and how I was placed in a class that was deemed the bad class because they were transfer
In a good
students and
school. That
in
bothered
a
me so
good
much. I was
school
like,
and
they
it was
did
a
not put
bad
you all in there
class.
and treat you like that because y'all interloping on
Yeah.
their special school here. Oh, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that teacher was like, no, I'm not going to let them do that. Like,
No,
I'm going to
yeah.
hold them accountable. And I'm going to say, hey, you going to let them do this to us or
Hmm.
you?
And I love
But
that
then
she brought y'all into it. Y'all know what they
she
say in the scene
did.
about you? Bring
Right.
you into that. I
Yeah.
brought 5-year-olds into stuff and they understood. Really? That's what's happening. That is what's happening, y'all. And I need y'all to help in this, right? And these kids are like, once
Yes.
you be honest with them about that, they're going to rise to that expectation.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what we did. We just rose. And then the we were determined to change that. And so if you have high expectations, the children are going to meet you there. If you have
Yeah.
low, they're going to meet you right there. You think I'm bad already? Might
Yeah.
as well cut up because
And that
that's
was the
already
same
what they
experience
see.
with the school your sister was in and how they treated
Yeah.
them so badly and then just can't and
Mm-hmm.
just treated them like that and that's how they acted. People
Yep.
don't realize that if why is
Mm-hmm.
the kid acting that way? Well, maybe because you're creating the conditions for them to
Yeah.
behave that way.
Yeah.
Sorry,
These things
behavior is
work together.
communication. So they're communicating
Yeah.
something to you based
Yeah.
on what's happening here. I know people don't want to
Yes.
hear that. My students would get so mad after they would graduate and they come back to me, Dr. Jones, I don't know what to do with this kid. And I'm like, how's your relationship with him? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, your relationship with this child, how is it? They're
Yeah.
irking your last nerve. You probably don't have a good relationship. I want you to go and find out 5 things about this kid you don't know in a positive light. What do you mean? I'm like, I'm telling you, you have to
It
change.
will
You see
change.
this child
Yes.
as a problem, and they're going to be a
A
problem. Okay. I
problem.
did this for an entire year, and it wasn't until almost end of the year when I met this boy's mom and I found out so much about his family that I was like, oh, snap. No wonder why he carries on like this.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Why didn't I know this in September? I didn't know this in September. So luckily I found out in like March and I was able to change the end of the school year because now I
Yeah.
understood where his behavior was coming from. He had
Yeah.
huge changes in his family life. The family integrated
Mhm.
from a family of 3 to a family of 7. That's a huge
Whoa.
impact for a fight. No wonder why he
Whoa.
needs to sit
Yeah.
right next to me and he needs to do this.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to feel himself. He lost himself in the family migration. There was a huge
Mm-hmm.
wedding. There was, you're a 5-year-old. No one's
Yeah.
focusing on you anymore. All these things are
Mm-hmm.
happening and he was losing it. So he was very desperate to have something, a sense of belonging in that class. And I was fighting
Yeah.
him on it instead of giving it to him. Oh, you know what? This spot right here, this is for our friend M. M, come sit over here next to me. This is your spot,
Yeah.
okay? Because he needed that more than what the other kids needed, right? And
Oh,
it
I
changed
love that.
everything. That relationship changed so much. I just sad that it took March until I figured out the tools. But again,
But it
when
could
I
have
tell
taken never.
exactly,
It could
never.
have,
If I could
yeah.
have just said, I don't care
Mm-hmm.
what your mom just told me, I don't care, right? You're still irking my
Mm-hmm.
nerve. He
Yeah.
he was the one kid where I'm like, you don't have to come to school tomorrow. He's like, what you mean? I'm like, I'm just saying. You start telling kids
All
at the end of
right.
the year, you don't have to come. You're not going to miss anything. And so yeah, it's like seriously, go build that relationship. Go get to see that child's humanity because
Yeah.
a lot of that will change once you see them in a different light. And I know that's hard. People don't want they want, the one trick, the behavior mod that's gonna do something. And I'm like, no, it's all about the relationship
See
you have with
them.
that child.
That's the
See
trick.
them. See them and
Hmm.
see them in a positive light. See them outside of the space where we're only taught to see what kids can't do. What can they
Hmm.
do? What do they like to do?
Yeah.
Getting to
Yeah.
know my students and who they were outside of the classroom was one of the best things that really opened things up. And I was just like, huh.
Yeah.
And it made the teaching better, right? It made it easier on some levels for sure.
And it makes it kind of dangerous for other people, maybe risky, because like way before I knew anything about Reggio Emilia, I saw children as capable. So I'm like,
Yes.
they can do it. They can do
Yes.
it. But once you do that, once you trust a child enough to think they can do this very strange thing, they can pour that glass of water,
Hmm.
and they can use that glass plate. And if they drop it and it breaks, I'll show them how to clean it up.
Yeah.
We'll get it together. We'll do this.
Yeah.
And once you do that, it's like you unlock something in a child.
Yeah.
Like they trust me. They think that
Yeah.
she
That's
thinks
them
I can do
rising to meet
this.
that
Yes.
expectation. They're like, "Ooh, I don't want to let her
Yes.
down. I don't want to,
Right.
and they might still mess up. It doesn't mean that they're going to be perfect. I think we
Yeah.
think that if there's any verge from the line of perfection, then what we're doing is not working. But perfection is not the goal because as you put in the
No.
one chapter, perfectionism is a tool of white supremacy, right? It's
A
something
hundred
we
percent.
strive
Yeah.
for, and it makes
Hmm.
a lot of the work we do impossible because we're
Yeah.
looking for perfect children, and that's not
Perfect.
what it
Hmm.
is, right? Yeah, he
Hmm.
spilled that water today. He might break the pitcher and the water glass tomorrow,
Yes.
but it's
Yes.
okay, right? Like, but we're gonna keep letting him do that because it's
Yeah.
what he needs to do. And yeah,
Hmm.
that underestimating what kids can do. I'll just share this story again. If anybody has any questions, put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we'll ask you. But if not, I'll end with this story. So I'm in China and Anji visiting the play stuff, right? And I'm seeing all the
Yeah.
playgrounds. And so we asked that we had a conference, plus we were doing tours and stuff. But I think it was during the conference where we asked about transition. Like I wanted to know because one of the things I learned about Reggio, I always said, what is it like transferring out of that preschool environment to that public school environment? Because we know there's a drop off. So I think in Italy and
Hmm.
Reggio, they have a lot of connections between the next grade teachers in there. So I was asking the same thing in
Hmm.
Ananji, China. How do you? And they said this was an issue, and they didn't know what to do. So they invited the next year's teachers to come visit before and them teachers were like, "We didn't know the kids could do all this. Oh my goodness! They've been your preschool water coming up. We've really been treating them poorly because they had no
Right.
idea what the kids were capable of. And so
Right.
once they saw, they
Right.
were like, we gotta change everything. And
Hmm.
so it started a partnership between the next level teachers and the preschool teachers to really think about what that bridge, because yeah, you can't have these kids doing all this for 3 years and then coming in your classroom
And
and you treating
suppress
them like
everything
you
that
suppress
they,
everything
right.
down and then you wonder why. But it was just like this light was lifted when they could see what
Yeah.
was possible, that children could
Yeah.
build elaborate constructions, that they could
Hmm.
concentrate for an hour and not need any direction, that they could
Hmm.
engage at that level. They were shocked. And I mean, we were all a
Hmm.
little shocked to see it, right? But those of us who
Hmm.
know believe it. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's help them rise. Let's help them rise
That's
to that
right.
occasion. And that's super important.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see any questions in the chat. I don't think I see anyone with their hands up. While we're looking, and you have another minute here, if you do have a question, I am going to briefly share my screen if I can get to it and just talk to you briefly about there we go, the next book talk. So our last one is going to be, hold on, I do this right here. It's going to be next week. As I mentioned, there were two book talks in June. We're going Wednesday, June 10th at 7 p.m. Early childhood educator and researcher Alyssa, and I haven't learned how to say her last name yet, so I'll just say Alyssa, joins
Hmm.
DEY to discuss her book, Stories of Resistance Learning from Black Women in Early Care and Education. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that registration in the chat so you can register. Some of you might have registered when you registered for this one because you had the option of registering for them both. But if you did not, oh, I have to stop sharing my screen. There we go. If you did not, here is the link for you to do that one as well. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kisa.
Thank
See, I almost
you.
messed
Thank
up.
you.
Thank you
That
so
Kisa
much,
Keisha is
Kisa.
always
Keisha.
tricky.
I know, right? Thank you so much for this
Thank
great
you.
conversation. The book is great.
Thanks.
I read most of it.
Thank
It's so
you.
amazing. I'm definitely will like to. We could have done a study group if we were still going to have our fall
Oh
book
yeah,
studies and stuff.
yeah, that would have been great.
But I can't wait till if I'm teaching college students again, and be like, they're like, "What? Get this book. You're reading this book." So
Yes.
I'll adapt it for my
Thank
college class
you.
for sure if I get the opportunity. All right, I'm just checking. Anyone else? Sounds good. Oh, and yes, I've forgotten. If you want to come off mute and thank Kisa, you can do that as well too. Someone else did that, and it was really cool. And people came off mute and
Yeah.
were like, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you,
Oh,
thank you."
nice.
I know. Yeah, it's a
It's
cute
always
little
nice to hear
thing,
the
but
voices.
yeah, but
Yeah.
they're pulling you up in the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
Thank
for
you.
sure. All right. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
We will
Take
send out this
care.
recording and we hope to see you next week, a week from tomorrow, at our final book talk for the series. Thank you all
All
so
right. Take
much
care.
and good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.